Good morning, Michael here, and today again we look at Psalms 116, focusing on verse 1 and 2. Let's read those verses. Verse 1. I love the Lord because he has heard my voice and my pleas for mercy. Verse 2. Because he inclined his ear to me, therefore I will call on him as long as I live. And so it turns to the Treasure of David for the exposition as penned by Spurgeon. Verse 1. I love the Lord. A blessed declaration. Every believer ought to be able to declare without the slightest hesitation. I love the Lord. It was required under the law, but was never produced in the heart of man except by the grace of God and upon gospel principles. It is a great thing to say, I love the Lord. For the sweetest of all graces and the surest of all evidences of salvation is love. It is great goodness on the part of God that he condescends to be loved by such poor creatures as we are, and it is a sure proof that he has been at work in our heart when we can say, Thou knowest all things, thou knowest that I love thee. Because he hath heard my voice and my supplications. The psalmist not only knows that he loves God, but he knows why he does so. When love can justify itself with a reason, it is deep, strong, and abiding. They say that love is blind, but when we love God, our affection has its eye open and can sustain itself with most rigid logic. We have reason, superabundant reason, for loving the Lord. And so, because in this case principle and passion, reason and emotion go together, they make up an admirable state of mind. David's reason for his love was the love of God in hearing his prayers. The psalmist had used his voice in prayer, and the habit of doing so is exceedingly helpful to devotion. If we can pray aloud without being overheard, it is well to do so. Sometimes, however, when the psalmist had lifted up his voice, his utterance had been so broken and painful that he scarcely dared to call it prayer. Words failed him. He could only produce a groaning sound, but the Lord heard his moaning voice. At other times his prayers were more regular and better formed. These he called supplications. David has praised as best he could, and when one form of devotion failed him, he tried another. He had gone to the Lord again and again, hence he uses a plural and says, my supplications. But as often as he had gone, so often had he been welcome. Jehovah had heard, that is to say, accepted, and answered both his broken cries and his more composed and orderly supplications. Hence he loved God with all his heart. Answered prayers are silken bonds which bind our hearts to God. When a man's prayers are answered, love is the natural result. According to Alexander, both verbs may be translated in the present, and the text may run thus: I love because Jehovah hears my voice, my supplications. This also is true in the case of every pleading believer. Continual love flows out of daily answers to prayers. Verse 2. Because he has inclined his ear unto me. Bowing down from his grandeur to attend to my prayer, the figure seems to be that of a tender physician or loving friend leaning over a sick man whose voice is faint and scarcely audible, so as to catch every accent and whisper. When our prayer is very feeble, so that we ourselves can scarcely hear it, and question whether we do pray or not, yet God bows a listening ear and regards our supplications. Therefore will I call upon him as long as I live, or in my days. Throughout all the days of my life, I will address my prayer to God alone, and to Him I will unceasingly pray. It is always wise to go where we are welcome and are well treated. The word call may imply praise as well as prayer. Calling upon the name of the Lord is an expressive name for adoration of all kinds. When prayer is heard in our feebleness and answered in the strength and greatness of God, we are strengthened in the habit of prayer and confirmed in the resolve to make ceaseless intercession. We should not thank a beggar who informed us that because we have granted his requests, he would never cease to beg us, and yet, doubtless, it is acceptable to God that his petitioners should form the resolution to continue in prayer. This shows the greatness of his goodness and the abundance of his patience. In all days let us pray and praise the Ancient of Days. His promises that as our days, our strength shall be. Let us resolve that as our days, our devotion shall be. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. How we can read those two verses and how the exposition can shine so many beams of light, so we get a more closer walk and understanding of our God. I trust you might listen to it over and over. Trust you might find the Treasure of David and read the exposition. Trust you might meditate upon the goodness, the awesomeness, the blessedness, the loving kindness of our God. Just you then, Michael here declaring, yet again, Jesus is Lord. Until next time, be